gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. I am very, very grateful and lucky to be joined by a very busy man, I assume. Does some great work over at not only the PFL but ESPN as well. Um, Ian Parker, thank you so much for joining LowKick MMA and coming to have a chat, previewing the upcoming PFL tournament.
My pleasure, man. Look, I'm happy to be on. I feel like this has been a long time coming, jumping on the show anyway. So I'm glad we had a chance to finally connect. This is awesome.
Yeah, most definitely, my friend. I feel the same way. Now, if we could just jump into this tournament straight off the bat, like
Sure.
obviously, with Bellator, the merger, PFL buying Bellator, this season or this tournament, sorry, has a bit of a different feeling to it. What are some of the biggest storylines for you coming into this year's tournament?
I think when it comes to the women, there's an opportunity here for someone to get a crack at Dakota Ditcheva at some point, right? She holds that holy grail of next big thing in the sport. So anyone that could kind of really grab the bull by the horns in that division and get a chance at her and even be competitive can create a name for themselves there. You have someone in Impa Kasaganai who's jumping down to middleweight where he probably should have been this whole time, even though he's had tremendous success at 205. So it's giving him a new purpose in MMA, another goal to go and chase after. Plus, I think we all know he wants that Johnny Eblen rematch, and that
Yes.
starts with this. Let's see, who else we got? Razor Rob Wilkinson and Phil Davis. I believe that should be a really fun
Great
fight.
fight.
For Wilkinson, this is a chance to get back to showing that he belongs at the top. And for Phil Davis, this is like, do I still have what it takes to compete at the top? If not, do I teeter back? We're going to find out there. And then, when it comes to like the heavyweights, I'm excited for guys like Alexander Romanov that were on a 2-fight win streak. They, free agent from the UFC, chose to come here for whatever his reasons were, which is great. We're happy to have him. And I think for him, it's a fresh start. He started off really hot in the UFC, kind of took a little bit of a downward slope and then won his last 2 fights. Now he gets to really bring that full skill set, rebirth his career in the PFL. And what else? Welterweight division. That one is one of the more exciting ones for me as well. Jason Jackson, former Bellator champ. He wants to get back to a title. You have guys like Thad Jean, who's an undefeated prospect, very exciting. And then you have Umalatov, who has been a perennial contender in the PFL, all in that tournament. So a lot of fun, a lot of good names, people that some know, some don't know. I think the PFL put together, with what they have, a really good competitive tournament for us to watch for the next few months.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you said competitive. As I was
Yeah.
sort of looking down the matchups that we have as they've been announced, and obviously the bracket in general, that really stood out to me as well. This is going to be a highly competitive season. And obviously in the PFL, you guys do such a good job of creating breakout stars. Like a fighter will enter into that tournament format, relatively unheard of or unknown to the mainstream, and then over that format will really make a name for themselves. And with Bellator, the fighters from Bellator, obviously some big names, free agents, ex-UFC fighters coming in. I think, yeah, like you said, the competitiveness is going to be next level. And just some of those matchups, like you mentioned, Impa Kasanganai coming down to middleweight. That one, in terms of just exciting matchups, like that Fabian Edwards fight, I think is going to be, yeah, I'm really, really looking forward to that one. And like you said, it's going to be great to see Impa down at middleweight because it was insane what he was able to do at 205,
It
fighting
really
up,
was. Yeah.
and the power he carried up to that division, like he was putting everyone out.
It
Um,
was, and I think where it showed against him for the first time was against Doublet Shakhmaradov,
in
where
the
he
final
kind of,
last year, yeah.
yeah, and that's okay though, right? To me that shouldn't be a setback for Impa because anyone takes a shot like that from a guy as powerful as Doublet, you're
Most
gonna feel
definitely.
that. And
100%.
and there's another guy like in Josh Silveira. I love that he's back in the PFL at middleweight. Same thing. When he was the LFA champ, he was both middleweight and light heavyweight. So this is really giving guys options to go back. This is the beauty of getting that Bellator roster and PFL combined. You can get guys to fight in their natural weight classes, and guys that have been fighting up, now they have the chance to move down or even go a little bit higher up. It all works out really well. I'm excited for it, man. The The one thing that I think the PFL has had trouble with in the past, and this is where it's gotten better, is that competitiveness, the gap, right? The talent gap. Here,
Yeah,
I
those
don't think
top seeds are usually,
yeah, there's not really any lopsided fights here that I'm going to sit
yes.
there. Maybe there's a couple, but that's going to happen in any, in any organization.
Yeah,
But
of course.
for the most part, there's a lot of 50-50 fights, which I'm really happy about.
And like you said, a lot of 50-50 fights in the opening round,
Yeah,
like in the first leg of that bracket. So, a lot of those big favorites and those big names are going to be exiting the tournament early just based on the matchups that they've found themselves in that first round. So, I think that's going to really shake things up as well in terms of the names that you actually start to see towards the end of the line of that tournament. And like we said before, just some of those breakout stars that through the work that they put in on this global stage, we're able to go, wow, these guys are high level fighters and just propels their career. With
I,
the
I
el
I love that. Yeah.
yeah, with elbows, you guys have got elbows now in all fights. Is that correct? So the tournament will feature elbows?
Yeah, so look, in the past, people were on Twitter getting, saying like, oh, you got to let elbows happen. What they weren't aware of, it's not that the PFL didn't want elbows. We all
Mhm.
want elbows. We all
Of
love
course.
elbows,
Yeah,
right?
of
It
course.
was a matter of the fact that if these guys were to get a cut in certain spots on their face, they wouldn't get medically cleared to fight in the next round. So, the PFL had to kind of play it that way, or else you would have had so many alternates and people that didn't necessarily earn the right to be in the finals or the semis. Injuries happen in the sport, right? And we've seen it before where guys who are supposed to be in the finals, they're not because they're injured, broken hand. But to avoid the cut situation, now that it's more spread out, now that there is one less round, as opposed from the season format now being an official Grand Prix type of world tournament, the elbows are now in play. Now it's time where we don't need to worry about cuts. There's enough time in between to heal them if that happens. So now you're getting the full-fledged overall mixed martial arts that's involved there. And what's funny though is that people complained about elbows, but when's the last time we've really seen a whole lot of elbows be the difference maker or ending in a fight, right? It's like we always look to complain about stuff, but then if you
Yeah.
break it down to the nitty gritty, there hasn't been a ton of elbow finishes in the overall sport. But I will say this, the PFL has always tried to implement that. They weren't like, oh, we don't want elbows. It's just
Yeah.
more about what's more
Fitting the
important.
format.
Yeah, it was like what was more important, leaving elbows in and risking some of the top guys, messing up the playoffs, or now they don't have to worry about that. So now it's elbows are in, it's a go. Let's rock.
Yeah. And I guess my question with the elbows coming from like a training perspective, let's say you're a PFL fighter for the last few years, right? And
Sure.
this has been, like a clear rule for you that you needed to be conscious of competitively. So you would have obviously altered that in the training room. This isn't going to be so much an issue for your Bellator guys, your ex-UFC guys coming in, but these PFL fighters who have, had to work on that in the training room, not letting those weapons fly, like
Sure.
do you think that that weapon is almost going to be regressed for some of these fighters, like having to take it out of their arsenal for so long, and now it's all of a sudden like, guys, let's throw elbows again. Do you know what I'm saying? Like the,
Yeah, I will. I listen. I'm going to give you a lot of credit here. That's the first time that any of these interviews has asked me that question. So that's a really smart question.
Thank you, my friend.
Yeah, you know what? Here's the thing. Coming from someone who's trained in mixed martial arts, I still train. I don't compete. I'm still doing elbows when I train, just as part of the workouts, part of throwing combinations to keep things different. So yes, in the training room, I guess if you're in the PFL and elbows aren't there, when you're sitting in mount doing your cardio drills, you know. It's easy to say no elbows here. However, I don't think that there's really a regression when it comes to that aspect of the striking arsenal. I think now it's just when they're doing their pad work, when they're doing their drills, you just put it in as opposed to take it out. Because I
And
think you've also seen there's been enough PFL fights where guys have accidentally thrown them.
yes,
Um, and they have landed them not that bad, but you've seen it. And I think the other part of it is that sometimes guys hold back from throwing the elbows up until the new rule of the 12-6 now being allowed. Right? Think about
yeah,
how
of
many times
course.
guys have held back because they don't want to hit on the angle and get called for it. Now guys are just batshit nuts hitting the elbows like that. They
Yeah,
don't care.
100%, man,
Now,
100%.
now it's like, oh, there's no rules with the elbow. We're good. I think it just takes a little bit of time to adjust. And Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's going to be much of a regression. I also don't think you're going to see as many being thrown because,
Hmm.
like I said, it's a great tool to have in there, but it's just not something that I think that if you stop doing, you forget how to do it because you're always training it. You just got to be smart enough to know if it's a rule or not.
100%. It's like it's more so something with you and the coaching staff, your team, to flip that switch on fight night. Um, and obviously signing up as an elite fighter on this global stage for an opportunity like this, it just comes with the landscape, sort of, you know. So,
Yeah,
um, and I,
absolutely.
and I'm sure that that opportunity is going to overweigh for sure that these guys, you know, and just with the elbows as well, like you said, it's not like now that they're allowed, all of a sudden we're going to be seeing everyone spamming elbows
Right,
because, like I
exactly.
said, this is high level mixed martial arts and it's really such minor adjustments at the high level. But from a
Exactly.
fan's perspective, just having that rule switched, even like you said, even if it's not necessarily going to equate to a whole lot more action, I think just from a fan perspective, like visually, that's a massive tick, you know, because like you said, it
For sure.
was a
Oh,
talking point
absolutely.
for so long, you know.
I think the fans also want to be heard. And
Hmm.
when the PFL does this, it shows that they are acknowledging the fandom. Because believe me, Don Davis, the one thing about him, people could say, whatever they want, good, bad, happy, or sad. The guy's on social media. He is listening.
He
He
has
is
his
trying to
ear to the
make
ground.
yeah, he's but it's not just him seeing Twitter be like, all right, let's do this. We could do it just like this. There's always a building, there's a protocol, there's a way to do these things, but he is listening. And some people may be like, oh, that's an obvious step. Yes, but people again didn't take into account the whole medical side of it. That wasn't him not wanting elbows. Believe me, the guy has been begging for elbows, but the last thing we want to do is risk. I mean, can you imagine if last year when Dakota fought Jenna Bishop, right? Jenna took her down. Imagine if Jenna lands an elbow there, cuts Dakota above the eyebrow, and Dakota still wins, but they have to stitch her up and she can't fight 3 weeks, 4 weeks later. We just lost Dakota because what, of an elbow?
100%.
Wasn't,
And
yeah,
yeah, when trying to structure a season, especially in the past where you had um, a bit more of a quicker turnaround for these athletes, yeah, of course that's
for sure.
going to be something that needs to be addressed. Now, in terms of your role, I've seen a lot of your stuff with ESPN bets, obviously
Yep.
on all the broadcasts with the PFL. Now, from someone who breaks things down from a betting perspective, in an organization like the PFL, where every year you sort of, like we've spoken about, have some not unheard of names, but to the mainstream and to the general sort of MMA fan base, these guys are new, right? And I'm sure new for you in some sense as well. So when you're watching film, trying to collect data on these relatively new fighters to the mainstream, how difficult is that to be? Like, is that process really difficult to be confident in your, yeah, in your abilities to really honestly break down a fight, seeing minimal film?
You know what? So I do it for ESPN for the UFC, right? And then obviously
Hmm.
for the PFL separately. I will
Hmm.
tell you that they're both equally as difficult in that regard because with the UFC, you have guys on the prelims or guys coming off the contender series that, to your point, mainstream, the general population doesn't know. And the hardest part, whether it's PFL or UFC, is finding not just tape, but tape against suitable opponents where you can compare their skill set once they get into the organization, right? Because you see a lot of guys with these padded records, and then they go on the contender series or they jump into a PFL showcase fight and they're just not ready for it. Their record says they are, right? But their skill set clearly shows that's not it. So for me, the biggest thing is finding out not only how many wins, losses, how they're doing, but who they are fighting. It's the first thing I look at. So like if the most recent win was by knockout round one, awesome. I'm not clicking his name. I'm clicking the opponent. I want to see the opponent's record and who they won or lost. Because if I click on that thing and this guy who's like 22-1 with 18 knockouts, but his opponent was 3-7, I'm sitting there going like, this guy's either really good, he just can't get opponents, or he's trying to, fool everyone, fake it till you make it, which happens a lot in this sport.
Hmm.
So it's challenging, man. It really is. You've seen guys on the contender series, though, who even perform well, and then they make their UFC debut, and it's not great. And you've seen guys that come into the PFL that are supposed to be these big names out of Europe or big names out of some big gyms. and training facilities in the United States, and they just come out there and they lay an egg. So for me, I think what's really important is some of these other organizations where the PFL pulls from, right? Whether it's PFL Europe, whether it's a Cage Warriors, all this stuff, and really get an idea of who these guys are beating. That's why Paul Hughes, in my opinion, was one of the most valuable free agents that have been around in a really long time. And that's giving a lot of credit to an organization like Cage Warriors, building up their talent to bring over to these other places, right? So like Paul Hughes was beating,
Like
these
had
same
a
level guys.
Jordan Vucenic, like that's one of his only loss in the on his record before getting to a bigger organization, and
There you go.
very
And
very
yeah.
controversial decision, and then he got that one back. So like
And exactly. So when you have these now, a lot of these guys want to take the path to least resistance, thinking they'll get to these places quicker. But for me, when I'm capping them and I'm doing my tape study, it's almost just as important, if not more, on who their competition is and who they're beating. Because, like I said, if they're fighting guys with terrible records that are also fighting, poor level competition, it's so hard to really get a good idea on who they are as a fighter until they step foot into one of these organizations. And that's why, like someone like Biagio Ali Walsh in the PFL, right? People are like, oh, he's got that name behind him. Yeah, but this kid can fight. And Biagio, yes, it's one of the few amateurs that got showcase fights on a big platform for sure. But when he fought his pro debut, he fought a guy who was like 3-1, and people are sitting there going, "We don't know who this guy is," but Biagio is only 0-0 as a pro, right? So then when he goes in there and he fights really well, it's like, okay, now who's he going to fight next that keeps raising that bar? Because if you take this for fighters, if you take the easy road and then you get rocked when you first get in there, it's tough. If you take your time, don't rush to failure, right? And have tougher competition earlier on, that really prepares you for the PFL, for the UFC, etc. So from the betting perspective, that's the hardest part of my job, right? Is seeing these
100%.
guys that are just coming into the PFL that, who they have fought in these other organizations and what organizations they're coming from. Not all these regional or, not even regional, these bigger companies are necessarily, they provide a platform, but it doesn't mean that they're the best either. So there's a lot of great ones out there that are really putting out some good prospects. And you could tell because you're seeing the consistent ones where they're coming from.
100%. I'm from Australia, and I think the regional scene here is just the talent overall now is so competitive on the regional scene. So
You can absolutely tell when a guy comes in from Australia or New Zealand type of situation, whether it's city kickboxing or some of your other teams, they seem to always be like really one of the top countries that are the most prepared.
because they
And
get tested on that
truly,
regional scene.
yes, they are, my man. Absolutely. I will say this. I'm not just saying this because you're from there, but it's true. When they come in there, they seem like they're the most polished, they're the least reckless, and they're the most prepared for that next level. And to both our points, because they're already being battle tested with good competition prior to jumping into these organizations, without a doubt.
And it's such a balance between, because like you spoke about, there really is something to developing a fighter.
Yep.
And obviously a fighter where you see big potential, someone like that, Nico, like if you don't want, like there's a balance between, like you said, padding that record, and then putting him on a track to failure too early and then
Yep.
shattering that confidence, which actually brought him to the dance in the first place. So must be, like to not only develop a fighter as a star, it's such a balancing act, but what you said about these fighters, they can be battle tested, they can have all of the skills, but reaching that next pinnacle of a PFL, a UFC, even a
Yep.
Cage Warriors, like this next step up of organization. How many times have we heard stories from the training rooms of
Yep.
these guys are world champions in the gym, and for whatever reason, come fight night,
Doesn't translate.
they
Yeah.
just can't translate it. So it's so interesting how not necessarily like skills in that training room will translate to you being an elite fighter, being able to put all the pieces together on that big
Absolutely.
stage.
No, spot on. And that's why you have some of the same gyms that produce some of these great fighters because they have such a tight-knit group and they're competitive in the gym. It doesn't mean go knock each other out in sparring because that I'm not a fan of, right? But it's more about having that level of competition where you can learn something, right? If you're the best guy in that gym and no one's pushing you in any way, you're going to hit a ceiling at some point, and that's where the growth stops. It's really hard in this sport to continue to evolve and get better if you're at a gym where there's no one there pushing you.
Hmm.
And that's just how it goes. We've seen it a million times. Some of these guys that reach the top, once they lose, they don't bounce back because they don't have anyone there pushing them. But that's why this sport, it's I call it the wild wild west for a reason, right? It's
100%, my friend.
but in the best way possible too. So
That it's a good transition actually in terms of good gyms. Like next week, your first event, Jason Jackson coming out of Killcliff. This
yep,
guy, just hearing other Killcliff fighters, back when it was Sanford MMA, even talk about this fighter, has just, everyone's spoken about how high level he is, how competitive he is in that room. And that's someone where it really has translated to the highest level. Someone who in Bellator didn't necessarily get the, I don't know, like fanfare he deserved necessarily for whatever reason, but just through winning, I think he really got there and was able to show his level. Like, I think he's a real big dark horse coming in. Obviously, someone who is known as a champion for Bellator, but I guess just speak to Jason Jackson and previewing that matchup a little bit because, yeah, we're very
sure.
excited to see him back this year.
Jason Jackson, I think, has been one of the best kept secrets in the sport for a while, right? I mean, we could go all the way back to when the gym was the Black Zillions,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
he's been a pivotal piece for a long time. Everyone who trains him talks about how he's one of those training guys in the gym that if an opportunity came up, he's the one to really break through. And to your point with Bellator, look, with Bellator, I always enjoyed watching Bellator because I just am a huge fight fan, not just from betting, from an analysis breakdown as within the sport. I just think that people just didn't know when some of these fights were, right? It became more of a marketing thing, getting
yeah,
these guys a
most definitely.
platform, right? And with Jason Jackson, when he knocked out someone like Amosov, that put him on the map. And then unfortunately, he had that tough beat in his last fight. But now being on ESPN, he's getting a guy in Koreshkov that's a known name, a dangerous fighter on the feet. But Jackson is just very well rounded. He's got the personality to be a star. The PFL is giving him that marketing push that I do think he deserves. He walks the walk, he talks the talk. He's got a great nickname. He's got a good style of fight. Comes from a great gym, like you said. He's a quality fighter. I think if he goes out there and he really puts a number on Koreshkov, people are all going to be like, all right, this is the Jason Jackson we've been hearing that's really the ass kicking machine. He just kicks some ass, right? And this is the opportunity he has, and I think he will make use of it. He really is. He's a good talent.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing him compete. Like you said, very, very well-rounded fighter. And I think about as elite as they come at 175 pounds, no matter what organization you're to look at.
Sure.
Before I let you go today, my friend, I just wanted to get a bit of a prediction based on, some of the biggest stars in the PFL, Dakota Ditcherer, Francis Ngannou, and Johnny Eblen. Obviously, we don't see
Go ahead,
these,
baby. Go ahead. Hit me with
we
the tough questions. I'm ready
yeah,
for it.
we don't see these guys in the tournament format this year, obviously, but
Yep.
not that's obviously not to speak on them not getting big, exciting matchups. So obviously, I think once the tournament shapes out a little bit more, we'll have a bit more of an idea about the next direction for some of these stars. But I just asked because what obviously Dakota Ditra in particular, the sort of hype, the run
Yep.
she was able to go on last year, just yeah, we can't wait to see her fight again because speaking of elite fighters at the top of divisions, like she is as good as they get at 125 pounds.
So the question is essentially what's next for everyone that's been kind
Yeah,
of
well, are
being a
we
little
are
bit
we
louder on Twitter.
yeah, are we waiting? Are we waiting to just see it shape out with the tournament a little bit more? Is
So I think so the exact specifics are probably above my pay grade and my
yeah,
role with the organization. Although, hey, listen, I love to,
to
hey,
speculate,
if I was
right? All we can do is
no.
speculate.
Listen, I can give you some direction and maybe give a little bit more insight without giving the exact answer because I don't even know specifically like what the actual thing is. But look, the reality is this: Johnny Eblen, Dakota, Patchy, right? The name, all the big title champions, whatever it is. None of them were ever going to be in the tournament. It would make no sense to put Dakota back in the tournament where she already beat essentially everybody. Like there's no other matchup in that tournament that would justify putting her in there, right?
I
So you got
agree.
to treat her as such. How do you make that star shine brighter That's where they're at right now, is trying to find who can she fight for essentially a vacant title. And that will probably take place on the Champion Series. Oh, no, it will. She will fight on the Champion Series. Against who? They're going to have to find someone outside the tournament. They're going to have to get creative because they're not going to wait, until the end of the year. Because remember, the finals would be in August. They're not going to have her fight one time this year, as she's arguably one of the three bigger stars in the organization. So my guess is that she would fight in July against somebody. Who that is, not a clue. To be honest, I'm not part of fighter operations, so I don't know what they have going on. And then I think at the end of the year, maybe she does fight the winner of the tournament in like a December situation. That would probably be ideal. For Johnny Eblen and Patchy, same thing. They will defend their belts on the Champion Series. For Johnny, I'm thinking there's probably a couple names per the Bellator roster that probably makes sense based on depth and who was going to fight for a title. And because remember, they also didn't have a 185 division in the PFL until now.
Correct.
So my guess is that Eblen will fight, let's just call him Fighter X in July. And then at the end of the year, the winner of that would fight the winner of the tournament. To me, that would make the most sense for middleweight.
Most definitely.
And then for Patchy Mix, the same thing. Believe me, the PFL wants these guys to fight, but I'm sure you're very well in tune with the sport. A lot of these guys received some absurd contracts from Bellator at the end. It's no secret. Juan Archuleta, a former Bellator fighter, so this is not me talking smack. This is just me giving honest facts. There was some crazy contracts given out that the PFL had to absorb some of them based on certain stars. And as a business, they have to justify, if we're going to pay this guy, I don't want to say more than what they're worth because I'm all about fighter pay. But in regards to where the state of fighter pay is, some of these guys are getting paid way more than what the UFC would give them. And people aren't going to buy pay-per-views to the amount of what they're getting paid, like the ratio, right? So PFL has to make it make sense. Like if we're going to give Patchy Mix top of the line money, which is fine at this point, they agreed to it. We need to give him someone that justifies that being a title fight, and it can't just be whoever's out there that's not
X1Z, 100%.
Yeah, because believe me, if the PFL in a perfect world, they run a Champion Series in the first quarter of the year, in the second quarter, third, one per quarter, once every 3 months, so they have title fights. The tournament is supposed to build contenders, get prospects some shine, build these rosters, and really develop this. Because people are like, oh, get rid of the tournament. Why would you get rid of the tournament? If you get rid of the tournament, this just becomes Bellator, and it just becomes the same recycled thing. We don't need to do that now, right?
Yeah, it's such a good point of difference. That format in itself. So, and I think a big strength.
Right. And here's my thing too. Right. Here's my thing too. Right. People need to understand the PFL is not trying to compete with the UFC. There's not a competition. The UFC is the Mecca. However, there is room for multiple organizations. There is room for I don't care if we call it 1A, 2B, 3C, it doesn't matter, right? For me, the PFL could be the best MMA organization on planet Earth on Thursday and Friday nights on ESPN, ESPN Plus, ESPN2, where fighters have an alternative if they can't get to the UFC. If that's their goal, right, it doesn't have to be UFC or bust. They have choices. There have been fighters that have chose the PFL because they're getting more money at this point in this career, and that's where they want to go. It's one of those things where these big name people, they will fight. They're going to get fights. The Champion Series is what the champions will be fighting on. People that are sitting there going like, oh, Dakota not being in the tournament is crazy. No, it's actually smart because then people would complain that she's fighting the same people. And
with her just beating Tyler Santos, someone who
exactly
was elite level in the UFC, challenged for the title, had a great showing there. It's like, how can you, like you said, justify putting her back into a tournament after what she's been doing over the last,
especially if what happens if she got paired up with Tyler in the first round? What would be the point of that, right? So 100%. For me, if Tyler were to get another crack at Dakota, at least if she goes out there and smokes everyone in the tournament, because the tournament, that division has, in my opinion, the best fighters that are not in the UFC. I mean, there are, some women on there that people might not have heard of that were good prospects from Bellator that are on there. I mean, look, Kana Watanabe was beating Liz Carmouche until 8 seconds left in that fight. Who knows what happens there? And styles make fights. Watanabe is a very good grappler, judo expert. And, when someone like Dakota is a striker, although we've seen her, her takedown defense has gotten way better and it's good. You got to be able to build some of these things up. And believe me, I want to see Dakota fight. I want to see that stock go up, that star shine brighter, but I want to see her fight the best that they could provide her. And that's what she wants too. So sometimes these things take a little bit longer than we'd all like, but it's also a
Yeah,
business side
there's a
to it.
method to the madness,
Yep.
100%.
And there's a business side to it that, people who've never run an organization or a promotion understand and don't understand. So, yeah,
100%. My friend, I want to just thank you so much for
my
your
pleasure, bro.
time today, brother. I know you have a very busy schedule, sorry, and yeah, like I said, I really, really appreciate you taking the time to have a chat, and I look forward to doing it again soon.
Anytime you want, all you got to do is ask. I'm in.
Thank you, my brother. Take
You
care.
got it.
Make sure to subscribe to the LowKick MMA YouTube channel for all the latest news, event previews, and interviews with some of the biggest stars in MMA.